Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Digital Retail Forum Africa 2020. It's my great pleasure to share with you my insights on the next level of e-commerce this afternoon. Before I start, just a brief intro on who I am. My name is Sihle Mkhize. You'd see there on the invite, it said that I am the head of retail and pharmacy at GSK, and that was my previous position. I've just moved into a new role. I'm currently the general manager for the convenience foods categories at PepsiCo. So let's kick start it off. And what I would like to do this afternoon is share 7 key trends that I believe are impacting the future of e-commerce. So what I'll do is I won't take you through all the trends now. I'm going to go through them one by one in more detail and discuss what I think about them, but also what does this mean for us as people who are interested in retail and e-commerce more specifically. The first one is that acquisition costs are escalating, and this is pushing brands to create long-term relationships with their customers. You know, there are 3 key things here, is that direct-to-consumer competition is growing. You've got an example there from the US of Dollar Shave Club, who are a personal care brand competing with the likes of Gillette. And they are setting up their own shop, and consumers are happily buying directly from them. And so that's skipping the role of retail. And that is something that as brands and as manufacturers we need to be aware of. And that's the opportunity that exists. Consumers are open to this, and they are a lot more willing to engage directly with brands. And so selling directly to consumers is an opportunity, and many brands are finding this a lot more effective, skipping the high retail costs that we know exist. Advertising costs are rising steeply. Gone are the days where digital was very cheap. Depending on the size of your brand, it might be cheap, it might be more affordable. But for brands that are a little bit smaller, digital has become unaffordable. You know, Ben Jabawi, the CEO of Privy, is quoted there making a statement that some brands are seeing ad costs go 5 times higher than before to drive the same amount of traffic. That's a loss of ROI. And so what does this mean? I think what has this resulted in is that it tells us that advertising and communicating just to get a sale is not enough, because each and every year the costs are going to go up. And to get that same sale, you're paying more. So something needs to be there in place that's going to give you a sale next year, because the consumers have either fallen in love with your brand, there's a stronger affinity, there's a stronger relevance. And so brand building is helping attract and retain customers, and we have to go back to brand building. There's an example there of the Always brand that has gone back to the core of who they are as a brand. As a brand, they're about feminine care, feminine protection, pushing the power of the female consumer, and they've discussed that a lot in their communication and have gone back to that. It's not about a particular campaign that is selling a particular range or a particular variant, but it's selling or communicating who they are as a brand. And they've seen incredible results in the last couple of years. And those results have come a lot through e-commerce as a consumer engages online and starts to shop online as well. Now, the second piece is, with the demise of third-party cookies and tracking, brands have needed to rethink personalization. So with Information Security Protection Act coming across, we know in South Africa, the POPIA Act, it means that there is limited ability from brands to track consumers and understand more about their consumers. So there's a little bit of darkness in this space versus where we were 5 years ago. Brands had the ability to understand who is Sihle, where do they stay, how are they buying my product, what do they like, and they were communicating with other third parties to form this really good persona of who I am. That's become a little bit more limited. And so brands need to rethink how they operate on the digital and e-commerce space to personalize and then therefore get the sale. And we know this because consumers are demanding personalization. Even though there's less information on them, They're demanding personalization. And there isn't a magic bullet to this. So brands are being creative of how they need to do this. And brands are creating communities to understand more about the shopper. We feel as consumers, and it's shopper psychology, we feel a lot safer in a community and people who look like me, people who like things like me. And so these are some suggestions about what brands need to do in order to win in e-commerce is, find ways to personalize. And there's a fantastic example there from Nike, where they've, really dialed up the customization angle. What that does is it gives a consumer a product that they want, but actually it enables Nike to understand the consumer a lot more in a way that is in line with the legal guidelines. And so one example, but what would this mean for retail? Are there variants that you could ask your consumers, what do they like in your range? What type of flavors, what type of products, what type of size, what type of packaging? These are interesting things to understand how you can bring it into your space in retail or whatever product that you are manufacturing or selling. The third piece is about the commercial opportunities that are arising on social platforms. We know our consumers are everywhere. They are engaging with one or all of these major social platforms. We see the big four there, which are Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. That is increasingly becoming a commercial space. It's not just about social activity. A lot of business is happening on these platforms, right? We see there a stat that comes from Shopify e-commerce market credibility report that says globally 54% of consumers have said that the ability to reach customer service in a channel or medium of their choice has influenced their purchase decision. So something as simple as being able to reach a brand's customer service on WhatsApp or on Twitter or on Instagram could change a shopper's purchase decision. Where is your brand in this? And so as you offer a product through a retail platform, maybe online, what else are you offering them that is in line with their wants and needs? And so this is intertwined. It's not one or the other, and I'll speak about it a little bit later on when I speak about omnichannel. There is an example there of Starbucks who've done this fantastically well. Their Twitter has become not just a communication space where they can sell, it's a great space where they get feedback from their consumers, interact with them, and get a lot of feedback about what are their wants and needs, but also eradicate any barriers that the consumers may have. Video is also playing a big part in making commerce a lot more sociable. And so there's an interlink there where consumers are expecting e-commerce to be sociable, not just a platform where they can get their product, but for it to be sociable. You see a big trend on fitness, where people are getting fitness advice. They are, interacting with their personal trainer as an example, but at the same time, that personal trainer is linked to a brand and selling products. That's just one example. And so social and commerce have just become intertwined. The fourth thing is retail competition is rising as the contest to win with the e-commerce shoppers intensifies. We see there the example, of those apps that we know exist: Pick and Pay Bottles, Pick and Pay ASAP, Woolworths Dash, Checkers 6060. You can think of others, I'm sure of it. And so 2 years ago, many of these things didn't exist. There's Zulzi, there is One Day Only. There's many examples of how this has increased in terms of competition and trying to win this e-commerce shopper. While the competition is rising there, we see that shoppers are actually saying we want both. Great, offer us that, but we still want to interact with the in-store at the same time. And so there's going to be a merge between what you're getting on your phone and what you're getting in store, And are those two interacting and connecting with one another, right? Because shoppers are craving an in-store shopping experience. They're using their social platforms, their phones, digital technology as a medium for understanding what's out there, perhaps getting information, and sometimes before they purchase are using the store as the final decision maker. There's an example there of Pampers, what they did with their new launch of their premium product. It was extending the consumer quite a bit to spend quite a lot more than what they used to on baby care products. And they used the store very well in baby stores and baby centers, where they put up an experiential booth to give consumer final details about the product and lock the consumer in and make the purchase. But they used e-commerce as a space to bring an offer, give information, trigger thought, make the consumer open to trial. And so the brick and mortar will play a different role, but it will continue to be important. The second piece we see on the right there, some examples about what's probably going to come. For those brands who may not be able to make an in-store theater or an in-store, experience, there's going to be e-commerce, digital, and information happening in the store. You're seeing there an example of, top right there, a consumer at Spa, seeing something on their app, looking at it in store and making a decision. Another example at the bottom there, where it's digital media and e-commerce happening live in the store. So these roles are going to become a lot more blurry, and this has the ability to limit or reduce the acquisition cost of the customer as you use the store for communication, the store for e-commerce, but also give the consumer the ability to interact with your products from home or wherever else they're going to be. The fifth thing is that we've seen through the pandemic, COVID pandemic, that customers have now interacted with other parts of the omni-channel journey a lot more than they did before. And so they're demanding a lot more from brands about the omni-channel journey. They're demanding a much better shopping journey in terms of omni-channel. And so what you had before as a brand and might have won over a consumer, right now, if that's the same as it was 3 years ago, you may be failing your consumers' expectations. And so, one way for brands to stay competitive is elevating their e-commerce omni-channel journey, such that if offline sales perhaps are squeezed, using other channels to grow. But if your offline sales are still healthy, then this channel can be accelerator for your brand. So the competitiveness of your brand, I would say, will rely on the omni-channel shopper journey in the future. Brands or consumers are connecting with brands across multiple channels. You see there that example where the physical store still plays a role. There's print. Some brands are actually leveraging call centers to drive sales, right? There's examples that I've been involved in where some brands are mass brands in South Africa, sold through wholesale, and a call center is a massive, massive driver for those type of brands where they're talking to spaza stores, they're talking to small individual store owners where your brands are being sold through that. So call center is seen a little bit differently. We know website is important, mobile. Many brands are actually now engaging through WhatsApp and selling through WhatsApp. Obviously, working within the POPIA Act and the right consumer communication channels. We see that example now in Starbucks in the US. Mobile ordering, contributes nearly 30% of sales now. Nearly 30% of sales. The consumer orders through mobile. They say, I'll come collect in a particular time, and their cappuccino is ready. Or there's an office park right next door. They say, can you bring 10 coffees? And that's just through mobile. And then the coffees are delivered right next door, wherever that is. So depending on how your product is, many of our products probably fall in that space where mobile ordering can become a player much more than in the past. Social media, I've discussed that now. Email, many of our retailers have this. We know this. It works quite well. And some brands, sales can go direct from your warehouse to the consumer, depending on what the model looks like. We know an example of one day only, where they sell in bulk, and it's going directly from a manufacturer's warehouse. They're using that retailer as actually just a platform to drive sales straight to the consumer. And so the omni-channel experience, you got to think about very differently to what you might have thought about it in the past. The sixth piece, before I close off with the final one and the seventh piece, but it's about supply chain. We've seen how in the last 2 years, COVID has really stretched our supply chains, and the weaknesses that have been exposed have forced retailers to revise their fulfillment and delivery strategies. These are all big retailers in the South African landscape that are playing in the e-commerce space, and I would say these are a fair representation of the big retailers on e-commerce. And on the left there you see various different fulfillment models. Is it shipped from store to the consumer? Is it the consumer picking up at store? Where are returns happening? Are they happening at store? Are they happening at a post office? We know Postnet has become a key player here for many retailers, where returns are happening there, pickup is happening there. Is it shipping to the store and then you're collecting to the store, shipped directly to home? And how are you locating your out of stocks, right? So many retailers use a model where the consumer will purchase from their nearest store. But if the nearest store doesn't have stock, how's the retailer picking that up? How are you helping the retailer pick that up? How are you picking that up to say, I'm trying to drive this particular product in a particular area, but I might not have bad out-of-stock numbers or service level numbers in the retailer in the region overall, but in that particular located area, it maybe is negative. Am I picking that up? And so these fulfillment models become very, very important, and retailers are open to change at the moment. And so we're seeing this is going to be a key player in the e-commerce journey in the next couple of years, where changing and adapting the fulfillment model to win will become probably a competitive advantage if you have this right. And then the last piece will be around ESG. We know that environmental, social, and governance matters are big in the consumer's mind. They're big in corporates' minds. But we might say e-commerce has been silent on this. E-commerce obviously forms part of broader retail, and broader retail has been fairly vocal on this. But I think as a space online, and e-commerce has been somewhat silent. I believe that e-commerce will need to become more vocal, and actually will need to lead the space. Those that manage to lead the space will get a competitive advantage and win more than their competitors, whether it may be the retailer or whether it may be the brand and the manufacturer. We've got some data there on the left from India, from Weber Hendrickson, and this is in 2008, so a little bit dated, but we believe this is still the reality, about carbon emissions from e-commerce versus retail store. And we can see just from one angle on customer transport, e-commerce has far less customer carbon emissions because of the fulfillment model. You can imagine where a customer is bypassing many different legs in the supply chain and getting it directly. So if you were to buy directly from a warehouse and it gets delivered to you, versus from a warehouse to a store, and then you're using your own transport to go collect at a store, the carbon emissions in that process versus direct to you are far less. Now, as e-commerce sales increase as a percentage of the total retail business, you can see how that's contributing positively to this agenda. Now, think through that in a little bit more. There are many other areas where I think e-commerce can play a role. What about communication? What about leveraging e-commerce as the leading platform to launch your brand that is improving and helping the sustainability agenda? Or social and governance matters as well. How is e-commerce playing a role for you? This one is something that is not being cracked in my mind by any retailer or manufacturer. Those that do crack it, specifically on e-commerce, I think there would be really big fruits to that. And so, yeah, I think there's some data there from Nielsen that shows the pre-COVID projections about the growth of sustainability in terms of sales and the importance and the contribution to total business. This is just to back up this point about sustainability becoming an increasing priority, and those who win linked to e-commerce, I think will have fantastic success. And so, yeah, so just to recap finally on the 7 points. The first is keeping in mind the escalating acquisition costs that are pushing brands to create long-term relationships with their customers. Connect with your customer. Brand building has become important again. It never went away, but perhaps faded. Bringing that back will enable consumers to, or companies to leverage e-commerce in a way that is more profitable for them, as they don't just have to use e-commerce to get the sale, and the rising costs of e-commerce being, leading to a lesser ROI. The second piece is about the demise of third-party cookies and tracking, meaning that personalization will have to be done in a different way, because brands and retailers are getting less information about the consumer, but the consumer is demanding more personalization. How do we manage that disconnect? Third piece is about the commercial opportunities through the social platforms. Think that through. How are you using Twitter to drive sales or to drive your brand? It might not be an immediate sale. How are you using Instagram? How are you using Facebook? Retail competition has risen, and we know this very well. Last 2 years, Checkers, Clicks, Dis-Chem, Pick n Pay, Woolworths, all have gotten into this space. But how do you complement that and your in-store retailtainment to actually offer the e-commerce shopper a rounded experience, because they are wanting the store to become an experience linked to what they've seen through e-commerce. So that still needs to play a role. The fifth piece is the post-pandemic customer is demanding a better omni-channel shopper journey. Look through all of the elements. Omni-channel cannot be the same for your business as it was 2 to 3 years ago. Now it means that you are providing an unsatisfactory experience for the consumer. We need to elevate that. The sixth piece is about the supply chain weaknesses that have been exposed by COVID. It means retailers are a lot more open to revising their fulfillment and delivery strategies. Are you partnering with your retailers to get a strategy for your brand, and together with them, that enables you to win and is more efficient and effective for the consumer? And the last piece is about e-commerce no longer being silent about ESG, but taking a leading role and becoming a force for good in this one. This will become a need. Those who are lost in this one, I think, might experience a painful journey. Those who are leading on this one, I think, might gain a lot out of that. And so, yeah, thank you for the opportunity for me to just share some insights on what I see the e-commerce journey going forward. I look forward to engaging with you with any questions, any thoughts that you might have. I haven't fully provided solutions to everything because I think it would be good to get into an engagement about thoughts, and every product and every brand, every industry, every category is different. But I think these are trends that probably will transcend across retail broadly. I hope you have a great afternoon further and a great conference, and looking forward to some healthy engagement and healthy discussions.